So come up a little closer, and we are very excited. We're going to let Miss Maureen, who has done so much work. I have to tell you, we're so blessed to have Maureen Scudder sit in as our reporter in residence. I always thought it used to be her height, but anyhow. She's my alter ego, and she has found these wonderful speakers, and so I'm going to let her do the introduction. So settle in. I think this is probably one of the most important meetings we will have this year. So thank you for coming in this cold weather.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, thank you for coming. I hope you're going to sit. Okay. Make yourselves comfortable. I know we're getting a little bit of a late start, but it gave us a chance to catch up, and that is in part what the parent coffees are about also, is connecting and seeing each other and getting a chance to have something yummy to eat. So please do help yourself to the coffee. Welcome to our third parent coffee in our Voices series this year. We are so delighted to have these three panelists with us today. We've been planning this for a few months. I have lots of notes about them. My own husband looked at my notes and said, those are too long. And I know that they would never do justice anyway to what these three men have done in their lives. And even as I compiled their biographies, the truth is so much of who they are happened long before anything is put on a CV or a resume or in a cover letter, and that's what we spent a lot of time at the Cobb School thinking about, is that the early years is where all the foundation is laid. And yet no one says, when you're going off to college, what preschool did you go to? Or what did your parents say about you when you were 4? No one asks that question, nothing even about the elementary years. It's all about how you performed, right, in high school. And it's a very hard battle that we fight here at the Cobb School and Montessorians everywhere to try to explain that these younger years are so critical. So if you have been reading the bios, and there are programs, and I see that they didn't, I set them by the door, but we already had them, and I think I'll pass them around maybe while while the speakers are discussing what children really need. I'm going to introduce them again. John Nearing, on my far left, I guess it's the stage left, your right, is the Director of Career Services at the University of Hartford, where he has worked since 1986. Many of us in 1986, that's not so long ago.
I'm old.
But really, it is. It's a long time he's been there. Before his 28-year stint at Hartford, he earned his bachelor's from the University of Illinois, a master's from Providence, worked in human resources, was assistant to the president of Bryan College, and was a naval officer. Before that, he spent 21 years building the person he was to become. And I hope he'll share snippets with us from those formative years, because we do care about what your first years were like. Over his 28 years in career services, he has worked with hundreds of students, helping them discover who they are, what they can do, and how to get there. He is a teacher, an advisor, and a strategist. A walking wealth of resources about markets, trends, economics, and people. John has been quoted in Time magazine and most recently interviewed on WWUH in West Hartford, which I listened to, which was great. When I asked John why he accepted my humble request to join us this morning, because we had never met before, he said this: your child is near perfect and has evolved to do certain things breathtakingly well. They are not necessarily the same things as her brother or her classmates. We are all different for a reason. Look at that. Let me get this straight. Her success in her career and life consists in finding out what those things are and in taking herself seriously. Learning to take oneself seriously and to become a good custodian of the gifts that we were given are tasks that must be undertaken very early. Today, many college students lack the self-awareness that is needed to persist in accomplishing anything that is truly difficult. This is why we've invited John here to talk about all those things, to tell us what that means and what we can do about it as parents. Please also welcome Dr. Larry Antos in the center. Larry started his clinical experience in 1972. Maybe that sounds like a long time ago. Some of you were not even born. I was. He began working in the counseling office at Wesleyan in 1989. The 17 years between the start of his career and his time at Wesleyan were packed with experiences most of us can't even imagine. After finishing his bachelor's at Loyola and a master's at the Illinois Institute of Technology, Larry took a job as a house parent at a residential treatment center for emotionally disturbed children. At first, he lived with children 7 to 12 years of age. Then he lived with adolescents. Then he managed a program with children 8 to 18. He worked with children so disturbed that no other program could or would take them. Even though Larry will be mostly sharing what he's learned while working in higher education at Wesleyan, his earlier experiences must have left an indelible impression that informs his philosophy today. Okay, and then there's Paul. Please welcome, bringing up the rear, Paul Asiente. Paul has led Trinity's squash team to 13 consecutive national championships and holds the title for the longest winning streak in the history of intercollegiate sports. The team's unprecedented winning streak, which began in 1998, captivated Trinity and beyond, followed by major media outlets across the globe and nation. You may have heard about Paul. The history of the team will forever remain a legendary piece of history at Trinity College. He is also the author of 2 books, Run to the Roar. The first one is about tennis, and he's working on a third. Am I right? Because the last time I saw Paul speak, he was in the middle of the third. So maybe that is going to help you launch us into what we're going to discuss today, which is what children really need. So why don't I start with you, Paul?
Oh, the least qualified person in the room.
That's right. I'm just going to throw you out there. And I was hoping that you can start, maybe even start with telling us why you're writing what you're writing and what you think children really need. And then I don't think I'm going to need to interfere at all into this dialogue because I'm hoping that you'll be able to respond to Paul and tell us about your experiences, Larry and John, and fill in all the gaps. And if we have time at the end, we'll take some questions.
Well, the reason I accepted this gig is that I have 3 grown children for whom I didn't do a very good job. And I now have 2 babies. My wife and I have a 3-year-old, and I would give anything to have her here. I really believe in what happens here, and it's just for us living in West Hartford, the commute is wrong, and I love Mrs. Cobb, and I just think what's going on here is mind-blowing. And so I wanted to add a little bit of something to the morning. I'm not sure what I can add, but so I believe in this place, and I believe in the system and of education. And so, yes, I've written a book, Run to the Roar, and it's a book about life lessons in sport. It's a book about learning how to manage fear, and it's a book that was written as an apology to my 3 children, because I really wasn't there for them when they were growing up, because I wanted to be the greatest coach in history and be on television, and now my book is being made into a movie and blah, 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 blah. And, but the essence of what I'm now into and exploring is a trend that I'm concerned about. And it happens probably a little later than this age group, but what we're finding is that children are not being given enough ownership over their journey. And I see it obviously through the area of sport. And you see it with the peewee parent and the hockey parent and trying to manage our children athletically so that they can get to the best college possible, so that they can get a scholarship or anything along those lines. And what I'm finding is that simply the children do not have enough ownership over their journey. And as a result, they do not have the tools and they're not equipped to deal with the challenges that they're going to face in college. And this starts fairly young. When I was growing up, my parents dropped me off at the field, and it was mine. And I made a mess of it. And, but I learned from that mess. You know, when I wrote my book, I interviewed Billie Jean King. And I asked her, what's the biggest problem? And she said, not enough ownership. She said, when I decided to turn pro, I told my parents I wanted to become a professional tennis player. My father took a second job so that I could afford to play. But they didn't come to any more of my contests. It was mine. I owned it. There's a story about a world-famous oboe instructor in the tri-state area in New York. And people bring their prodigal children to him from all around the area, and he meets with the child, and if he deems the child worthy of his attention, he tells the parent, I'll take this child on under the stipulation that the next time I see you will be on the night of the recital. Your child will find their way to me. We don't do that as parents. It's counterintuitive. We want to manage everything. We want to protect them. We want to make sure that, you know, the coach is giving them enough playing time. And so what happens is these kids come to us in college and they look way more put together than they've ever looked before. And the first time they find adversity, they fall into a million pieces. They completely fall apart. And everybody's coming now diagnosed as ADHD or bipolar. They're all on Ritalin or some form of medication. And it's because they haven't been given enough, at least in my opinion, and you guys are way brighter than me, but it's because they're not given enough ownership over their journey. And then we have the helicopter parents flying over the universities, making sure everything is being taken care of. And waka. And if, you know, and if one of their sons is not getting his way in the squash program or the tennis program, an email goes to the president. And that email makes it to the athletic director. And then the athletic director calls me into his office. And this email discusses the esoteric value of sport. Or if you read between the lines, what it's really talking about is Johnny's not getting enough playing time, and the parents are not happy about it, and the parents are trying to continue to manage this process. And the result of this is that our kids really are coming to us crippled. I'm seeing more cheating in college than I've ever seen before, because they've not been taught it's okay to fail. It's okay to be human. If your knowledge of this subject matter is deficient, the correct result is a failing grade. There's nothing wrong with that. But no, that's not acceptable. So they'll cheat. And we're seeing it in, I mean, they're texting each other answers in exams. And it's not unusual. This year alone, I've had 2 players drop out of school because they essentially had nervous breakdowns. I had a young man on the team this year on Christmas Day be institutionalized at Columbia Presbyterian. I visited him on New Year's Day, bipolar, and just a mess. And the parents are just so overwrought. Now maybe this was going to happen anyway, but it's my feeling that at least through the sporting paradigm and whatever other extracurricular activities you find for your children, let them own it. Let them negotiate it. People come to me all the time and they say, does Johnny have what it takes? Who cares if Johnny has what it takes? The question is, does Johnny have the passion for what he's doing? Let the passion, that child's passion, drive the direction of your support. So my opinion, and then I'll shut up because these guys are way brighter than me.
You gotta stop there.
Provide your children a bouillabaisse of activities. Let them, you know, from a coaching standpoint, if I open your garage, I should see a golf club, a tennis racket, a pogo stick, a box of summer reading, skiing. Let them experience everything. And then let their interests drive what you become supportive of for them as they go. I would rather see a tone-deaf child who loves to play the piano, than to see the fastest child in school running cross-country and hating every minute of it. You know, there's a Sports Illustrated story of the fastest woman in America in college who hated her experience. And the gun went off, and she was a quarter of a mile ahead of all the other runners. And the race went over a bridge, and she jumped off the bridge. And I got an article yesterday from Penn University that their star freshman lacrosse player took her life. And it was because the pressure and us, in the name of love, which is the title of my next book, in the name of love, we're trying to give them their best opportunity to excel in an area that maybe just doesn't fit with their psyche or their emotional needs. And so this is a completely nourishing and enriching environment. You've got to keep that going through their extracurricular activities later in life, or in the name of love, you're hurting your own children. So that's why I'm here today. Next.
Go ahead, John.
You just conjured up a vision, Paul. I go through this every day, and what'll happen is Marcia, my office manager, will say, your next appointment's here with her mother, or with her father, or with both of them. Most recently, it was actually with the mother and the girlfriend. But it's cosmically funny. I'm a career counselor in a college, and it's like, wow, okay, I've got mom and dad and everybody gathered. How old are you? I'm 21. And, you know, the parents seem to be integrally part of this conversation. So the first trick, of course, is trying to separate the parent from the child, but usually I owe them an hour of conversation anyway. And it strikes me that a lot of things that we deal with in college, I'm sure you do, Larry, in a lot of ways, the helicopter parents, much of that probably would have been made moot if certain things had actually happened, you know, back in third grade or fourth grade, maybe first grade. We never really understood neurologically what was going on with any of this before, but as I read it, and you're probably more of an expert in this than I, there's this thing called executive functioning, which takes place in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. And what happens is at the ages of the kids here in the Cobb School, that process begins to take place. Children learn how to inhibit their emotional responses, how to wait for a reward, how to sort out what has to be done on the way to accomplishing a goal or a long-range plan. And they develop this thing called a mirror neuron system, a mental model of what another person is experiencing in their presence. In short, they develop empathy. And this is precisely what we see absent in college students, not just at University of Hartford, but in good schools like Wesleyan and Trinity. But, you know, and we do have a lot of talented students in my institution. It's just that across the board, when I remember what I was seeing at University of Illinois when I was an undergraduate. These were kids who came from all over the world. I remember walking to class behind a Vietnam vet who was literally walking on his hands because he had no legs left. But the prosthetist had fashioned, you know, metal feet, and he would walk 1.5 miles on his hands. And this is the type of independence that I see totally cosmically absent among college students. And I'm often told, you know, in our own administration that we're accepting essentially 70% of the college-age population. When I was going to school, it was 12. But, you know, that's only a part explanation. And I think I go back often to the neurology of it, that there's this window of opportunity that occurs at the ages when the kids are the ages they are here at the Cobb School, where if these functions are not encouraged, where the child is not allowed to fail, and to fail with a lot at stake, she will not develop the skills that will enable her to be an independent person, to write a novel or a book, to play a concerto, to do good science. And this, I'll confess, this scares me a lot. I still see talented students, but I see them in diminishing numbers, diminishing percentages. And maybe it's a little self-serving. I'm hoping that there will be people to economically take care of me when I retire, because I long ago gave up the notion of retirement. But that's it. When I walked by with Mrs. Cobb, the classrooms, the thing that was so evident was the quiet intensity of the students. I could see that they were multitasking, they were learning leadership, they were learning to communicate. I could visually see those neurons in the mirror neuron system sprouting dendrites and growing. I thought, wow, this is so cool, because in a college environment, essentially they're wired to their iPods or their cellular devices, and even that conversation that we used to take for granted in college classrooms, shut up, as you walk in to teach. Well, no, they're all essentially zoned into something remote, and I wonder what's going on up here. So with that, I'll shut up. Poor Larry.
No, I mean, this is really kind of amazing, because we hadn't met prior to, even starting our email trail just before this panel, and so therefore, my thoughts and my perceptions about college students and how over time, because I've been at Wesleyan over about 23 years now, and you just see the difference in terms of the students that are coming in, and both you guys are speaking to exactly the same thing. So I know now I'm not hallucinating, or I'm not some bubble, that's just unique to this school, to Wesleyan. And I've been at conferences, so the research is even out there in terms of what is happening. Is that the students that are coming in, you look at their CVs, their resumes and everything else, is like they're outstanding. But you look at them, they're younger and younger emotionally than they've ever been before. It's amazing. And just like you said, Paul, the first amount of stress, like maybe somebody who I thought was my friend after 3 days, doesn't talk to me the next day. I'm just overwhelmed. I don't know what to do with that, And the smallest amounts of stress are just tipping them over. And I got to tell you, I've read so much about, even when I was an undergrad, long time ago, about education and different models for education, including Montessori, but I never visited a Montessori school. So being here today, I so appreciate the tour, because I got to tell you, just at a very visceral level, the kind of peace, the kind of tranquility, the kind of order, the sense of civility and everything else that is here. And then I know what I'm going back to in just about an hour and a half. Okay?
It's scary.
It's scary. It's really scary. It's like, just like you're saying, it's like ADD, restlessness, anxiety, everybody's on medication. I got 300 postdoc hours in psychopharmacology because I know what I'm up against, I know what they're coming in with. And so, when I see this at this age, I'm thinking, wow, this is what kids need. They need to really find and be comfortable with discovering, with failing, with seeing what they're good at, what they're not so good at, okay? And being able to pursue it. And that's what's missing at the college age. When I get to seniors, and you're going to see them, in the Career Center, before they're out, and I'm trying to give them this advice about, don't worry if you don't have it figured out yet, it's okay. It's all about this discovery. But they are so far removed from the discovery that this school is starting with these young children, okay? That is essential. That is what these kids don't have, and I'm not so sure they ever had. I'm not so sure that they ever had. I think it was all put in front of them. You're right, the ownership, there was no ownership. There was no ownership. A lot of my family's in Illinois, so when I go to Illinois and I watch nephews, nieces, play sports and everything else, and you go out to those things, the parents are all there, and the kids are on the field, watching the ball go by, or, thinking about something else, it's like, why are they there, And I know why my nephew plays football at 10, so he can have the Under Armour, so they can have the shoulder pads, so they can really look like the action figure he owns, And but when it comes to actually playing, he's drifting too, It's like, but it's important for the parents that we're all looking that way, and we're. It's that kind of deception of like. you know, because you start reading a lot of literature over time, I read a book in 1981, mind you, and it was by a psychologist named David Elkind, and he pretty much talks about the fact that we're just making our kids grow up in a very exterior way. They look more grown up.
The
Okay.
hurried child, right?
I'm sorry.
Was this the
The
hurried
hurried child. The hurried child.
One of the best.
Yeah. If all you do is just, I mean, it was 1981. If you just replace, you know, some of the modern gadgets and some of the paragraphs, you know, it's as relevant today as it was in '81. So this has been going on for a long time. And what happens is that everybody looks and dresses and sounds like they're so much older. I got kids who come into me as freshmen and they're saying, well, have you read this? Have you read this? You know, it's like, no. I have no problem saying, I don't know that, you know, or I don't know that author, and I don't feel bad about that. But they, you know, they need to know that, but they don't know how to deal with the fact of a roommate who's just a little more difficult to live with. They just, it completely escapes them how to deal with that, okay? And you know, you're talking about hospitalizations and things like that. You know, you have this winter break too. You know, I had somebody hospitalized for a complete breakdown, and then in Thanksgiving another one. You know, and what is so breathtaking about this is now that a lot of times when I see the first year students, there's not that discovery, there's not that joy that I'm looking on these little faces walking in here. Oh my God, I love it. I just, you know, I'm going to call in and say I got to stay here for the rest of the day. You know? It's like, I need to get recharged, you know. It's like, or calm down, you know. And it's like, oh yeah, now I'm losing my whole point. Yeah, but it really
Dedicated.
yeah, but you know. It really is. It's a different kind of atmosphere. It's that sense of discovery and that I can be okay with myself. And I tell students all the time, I'm trying to get them back to what I see here in the classrooms. It might almost sound like I'm pitching Montessori. I'm not. I'm just so impressed just from what I've seen. Okay, I've read about it, but now I've seen it, and I've felt it, okay? Felt it even in the calmness and the tranquility and the politeness and everything else, you know? This idea of community even. There isn't that sense of community. It's cutthroat out there, you know? It's like we're always looking at who's doing better than me, you know? Because I got to be the best, you know? I have to be the best, whatever that means, you know? And, all right, now I'll shut up because, you know, you'd be here all day.
I'm going to interject and build on that. That was great, thank you. If I could listen to you guys talk all day. I think
scary.
we want our children to excel. We want our children to be extraordinary. We want our children to be special. We want our children to change the world. And I think what we could do more of is just help our children be really comfortable with who they are. My 3 grown children, my daughter graduated from Trinity. She's the director of international studies at NYU. My middle son works for the New Jersey Easy Pass organization. He installs Easy Passes. My oldest son is a heroin addict, and that's why I wrote my book. But I spoke to a young lady last night. She was in my office, and she's my squash manager. And she was talking about her suicidal thoughts. And I know we're painting these dark pictures, but we're seeing dark pictures every day. And I was talking to her why, first of all, I asked her, have you thought about how you want to kill yourself? Because that's question 1, and she hadn't, so we were okay. But she said, you know, I'm not good at anything. I don't have anything. I'm not special at anything. And I said to her, before I called the school psychologist to make sure she was put into professional hands, I said, you know, it's funny. My father recently died, and there was nothing extraordinary about my father. He wasn't awesome at anything. He was just a really wonderful average Joe. And that was the beauty of him. Why do we have to be extraordinary in everything. I'm supposed to be the winningest coach in American history. I have made such a mess of my life as I've gone through it, trying to be extraordinary. And I'm only now, at 61, trying to be comfortable in my own skin. This is where it starts. So while you're trying to support and nurture their talents, there's nothing more important than making them feel really good in their own skin. Because in the end of the day, we come into this world alone and we leave it alone. And all we have is ourselves. And I don't think, can't even count on one hand the number of kids I see in a day who are comfortable. And it doesn't mean you don't want to still have your foot on the accelerator and you still want to be driving and striving, but all of that comes out of first, I'm okay. I'm comfortable with me. And I don't think, this is where it begins. We saw that. Little people came up and shook our hands and looked in our eyes. Said, good morning. And they meant it. Kids come into our offices and shake our hands because they want something.
And eye contact is,
All Asperger's. Yeah. Looking into the classrooms was somewhat eye-opening because it resembled little tribes of hunter-gatherers. And something in the back of my brain was thinking, wait a minute. You know, here's the classic evolution, the ancestral environment of all of us. Everybody's good at something, and everybody's good at different things. And the task, the simple task in each of these classrooms is that each child was learning what she or he was capable of. You know, like, I'm a class leader. I might be the athlete. I might be the comic. I might be the intellectual. But everybody is different. And learning that necessarily, you know, the big guy, who's a Celtic mother goddess, actually made you different from the others for a purpose, because it helps the tribe to survive, and consequently you as an individual will thrive. This dependence on the individual from the group and vice versa. That seemed to be a major, major thing. So we see students who come into our offices whose view of reality has been painted by what they see on Netflix. I'm a criminal justice major. I must be an FBI agent, special agent. I really hate my classwork. I'm almost flunking out. But by gosh, I'm going to do this, whether it kills me or not. My last appointment of the day, yesterday, was a young lady from Illinois who wanted to be a lawyer. She hated law, but you know, somehow it had gotten into her brain that she had to get into law school, and it was my job to make sure she got into law school. And she just walked in, no appointment. This is what we're dealing with. And to be able to understand that you're destined only to be loved by your children, which is a major accomplishment. Or perhaps you're going to be mediocre at all things, but at least mediocre. Or perhaps maybe you do have a talent. You can play the piano, and your classmates are making fun of you because you can't, but that's yours. It's so intriguing. And I notice with my own kids, who are now adults, got two of them, I watched in some horror and fascination as they wrestled with this dialogue between their media selves and who they really were. So my daughter was a flute major at the Hart School, and she walks into my office second semester, senior year, and announces proudly that she's going to give up her flute for the rest of her life. She wants to be light years away from the sound of a flute or a flute teacher. So I asked her the obligatory career counseling question, have you considered what else you might do? And she says, yeah, I got it all figured out. I want to teach little kids. I said, okay, and how long will that take you? Well, 18 months more to get certified. And so she does that. And she gets an ideal job teaching talented and gifted students down on the shoreline in this horror show that's known as the American Public Education System. And she lasts 3 months before she crashes and burns. So she's back into my office, and I ask her, what now? And she says, I want to be a social worker. So she gets all the education and credentials to do that, goes to work in a women's shelter in New Haven, and lasts 1 week. Okay. So third time around, this is, she's not yet 30, so what are you going to do? I said, well, against all reason, I've been offered a job as a business manager in a software firm in Middletown. They develop oceanographic exploration software. Are you going to take it? I hate this, I hate this, I hate this, but I need money, I'm going to. She did it, and she loved the job. She's doing it right now, but only to finance her career as a psychotherapist. She's going to St. Joe's. And I don't see her much because she's performing on her darn flute every darn night. I tell you the story about the boy, but that would take a long, long time. The problem is that we're delaying the development of our children because a lot of it is catch-up ball, and oftentimes if they don't discover a passion when they're 6 years old or 7 years old or 8, you know, that leaves, and that's what scares me. We lugged a piano into our house, and that's what got Alyssa sort of addicted to music, which jump-started a bunch of other things. But everything is happening right here, trust me. It's nothing significant will happen in college other than the continuing trajectory of your child's development if they get it right here. You know, all of that is just the afterglow of the Big Bang. But this is where the universe is being born, I think.
Wow. Wow.
I have a question. So when did this all sort of start to become so bad? I mean, I have young children, and it just, I can see even with my high school age babysitters, and when I ask them, you know, how do you like school? They say, oh, we don't, but you know, it's all about the grade. They tell me that. So
Yeah.
when did this become such a huge problem, do you think? I mean,
Why do they want to go to college?
Exactly.
I mean, why don't they just not join the Army? I wouldn't recommend that, but join the Peace Corps, go surfing on the West Coast, be a missionary in French Tahiti, something. But there's some chance to fail, to learn who they are.
I don't know exactly when all this started, but I can, if I go back when I was in undergrad, and I finished undergrad in '71, and college wasn't for everybody. Okay, I was in a small parochial school, high school, and I was on a track for college. All the rest of the kids that were in school were not going to college. Okay, but I was somehow put there because somebody recognized maybe I'm good at some of these pencil and paper stuff. Okay, and so I was put on that track. But but now if you talk to the kids, it's like this is something that's existed since the beginning of time. Is that you have to work so hard, you have to show how good you are so you can get into the best school possible, because then once you get into the best college possible, you're going to get into the best graduate school or professional school, and then you get the best job. It's all preordained. Now you just have to find the right manuals to actually do this and get there. And God forbid you should check for a second what you really want to do and where your passion is. I mean, when I have to tell kids just to slow down, just be quiet, just sit with yourself. These kids, a lot of times, I think what I'm hearing and what I see is that, especially at the college age, kids are in this developmental task of who I am as this emerging young adult, okay? And anymore, who I am is
Mm-hmm.
simply what I do. That is how I identify myself. I am what I do. Yeah. I go to bed not as Dr. Antos. I go to bed as Larry. Okay, I go to bed as a good husband to my good wife. Okay, as a good friend to my other friends. That's who I go to bed as. Okay, I don't go to bed as a professional or what I did during the day. And I have to. And that's why these kids, they can't sit still for a second, because if I stop doing something, I cease to exist in my own skin, okay? I am what I do, and if I'm not doing it, and doing it to a certain level, I'm in trouble, okay? I don't know what to do at quiet time. Therefore I got to be doing this and then doing this, and this freneticism that I see is just so, I'm talking myself out of going to work today, okay? Because I see what's here, and I know what I'm going to, and it's like, oh, geez. And it's like, why do you build that in, and, yeah.
I would only comment that I saw, I did a talk once in Chicago on what I've seen in each decade. Somewhere, I think it was the 70s, help me out, 80s, there was a whole self-esteem movement.
Oh, yeah.
God help us. I'm sorry to say that, but we want our children to have self-esteem, but we can't hand it to them. Maria Montessori said it's something that they work at. It's through their work, it's through their exploration that they develop a sense of self, pride, ownership, confidence. We can't hand it to children, but somewhere, and I don't remember exactly when, but it was, let's make our children happy. And I say this often, if there's not any other book, of course we want you to read Run to the Roar or whatever, but please read, is it Wendy Mogul's book, The Blessings of a Skin Knee? If you do nothing else, read that. Because what I have seen, aging myself, is that we don't want our children to ever hurt. And if I had a plea to all of you as parents, and I certainly, this is how I am as a grandparent, I'm not the soft, cuddly grandparent. I think children have to fail to learn, and it's okay. They have to get a skin knee. They learn from it, and it's how we deal with it as adults. To say, that's not a big deal, try again. But now it's like, oh my, I've seen parents do this. How does it make you feel? Don't go there. I mean, I had a child the other day, we are seeing more children with anxiety disorder in the school than I've ever seen. We're not alone. I talk to colleagues. This is an elementary preschool. God help me. No one gave me Ritalin. I obviously am hyperactive. It has served me well. I don't get tired. I get up at 4:30 or 5. It has served me well. But we medicate children and tell them to sit still, not move, be quiet. I don't get it. And then I just want to say one last thing, because it's all related. The self-esteem. We had a parent, sorry, my back is many weeks, come in this week, and I'm just perplexed, and maybe someone out there can tell me about this. Larry, you're a psychologist, whatever. Okay, their child is in a preschool. The parents are bright enough, thank God, to see in this local school, public school here in Simsbury, which is highly respected, and it's not the only one, there's one in Avon, where they have a color chart on the wall. And here's the deal. You start off, I think she said, in yellow.
And green.
What, is it green?
Green, and then this is kindergarten. With each
Kindergarten.
infraction, you move. So then you're in yellow,
Yes.
and by the, then if you're playing with your laces, you're really down in the red.
Yeah.
And
So
then
this
red,
is
you get
stars
the no.
on the refrigerator system.
It's even more, if the child, so they don't have PE or any kind of physical education until 2:30. She's a very, she describes bright child, I suspect he is. And after lunch, he has to lay his head on the table and be immobile for 30 minutes, can't move. If he does, he's lowered on the color scale. This is not the first parent to come in and but why are parents accepting this? I said, this is ridiculous. Do you want to hate colors? This is one way to hate colors. But what is it doing to a bright child's sense of self? I mean, forget the word self-esteem. I mean, it's just contradictory to what's right for the human being. That's all.
Well, we see it in sport all the time. I mean, the classic, you're late to practice. What does the coach make the child do? Run laps, right? Do push-ups. You're late, run laps. Well, we're using exercise, which is healthy for us, as punishment. So when you're 50 years old, do you wake up and say, well, I'm looking a little chubby. I think I'll punish myself today and run laps. It's so counterintuitive. I think the thing about where it all changed is, you have young children. Is it conceivable in your minds that your child might not go to college? No.
There's the key. It's economically driven. Did anybody see the Oxfam announcement the other day that fully half of the world's wealth is under the control of, was it 81 people, I think?
Yes.
Yeah, this differential between the rich and the poor is at levels so dangerous. We've never really seen anything quite like this before. The last time it was this way, there was a little world war and a revolution in Russia and a few other things, but and then a Great Depression as a consequence, and then another big war. Yeah, that's scary. But the notion that your child has to go to college to be not only economically successful, to enter the middle class, but to avoid starvation, that's something that's insidious, dangerous, and absolutely, totally devoid of any common sense. You know, so much greatness comes from people who did not go to college at all. But the other insidious thing I'm seeing right now is that certain college majors are being touted as more economically viable than others. So if you want your child to go to college and be successful, you know, not only does she have to go to college, but she has to study engineering. That's as of yesterday. Or the day before it was business administration. But don't let your child study art or media studies or anything. Who cares? You know, by the time they graduate, the economy will have self-corrected, and you know, much of this, hopefully after the Arab Spring and a few dozen other things, will be moot. But I think that parents, for all the right reasons, are getting the economic message that their child has to go through this narrowing trajectory that will take him or her through a prestigious college, into a prestigious major, into a prestigious graduate school, without knowing who the heck she is. And that scares me, because that's where we get adults committing suicide. The other interesting thing, I was on my passenger seat in my little PT Cruiser this morning. What I was reading before I walked in was a book by Tom Brown, professor at Yale, on ADHD. Everyone in my family except for me has ADHD, you know, French-Canadian thing. It settled, yeah. That's what caused the new world to get explored. Okay? There are two classic ways of treating ADHD. One is with large quantities of methylphenidate, and the other is to give the person something exciting to do.
It's easier to
Find a kind. Have children with Indians, you know, and explore. Question Maxwell's equations and figure out where those nonsensical solutions are coming. So Einstein, after being refused an assistantship at Zurich, you know, gets this little scut job at the patent office in Bern, Switzerland, and he takes the tramway to the bars with his buddies to get drunk every night. And it occurs to him that as this tramway is going through the cityscape of Bern, that if he imagines his vehicle going at the speed c of light, you know, the visual look of the city will change. So he starts doing this visually, you know, in his head. Okay, what's going to happen to mass? What's going to happen to time? Then he calls up his professor, who nearly flunked him, and called him a dull lad and said, "Herr Professor, I've got this idea, but I need you to help me with the math." In 1905, and you can read this in Annalen der Physik, the Annals of Physical Science out of Berlin, he publishes a paper on special relativity that has no math in it. It's crystal clear. It's a masterpiece. And every physicist in the world is saying, why the hell couldn't I have thought of that? So Einstein almost certainly had elements of ADHD and probably Asperger's. He wasn't medicated. He found something to do.
I have another question. Is this most prevalent in the U.S. that you know, or is this the same at other universities in other parts of the world, like in Europe? I mean, are the children suffering from the same thing? Because maybe I'll move there.
I have 13 different countries represented in my program, so I might be able to, I think the divide is wider between the haves and the have-nots in most other countries. And I think even in England, I mean, you go to Manchester, there's just 18-year-old boys on the streets just getting drunk all day long. Either you have a chance and you go on, it's more bleak actually, and there's just less opportunity, and the affluent provide their children what they possibly can have. But it's not just not foreign to here, or foreign, poor choice of words, but it's, in terms of the diagnosis, we are a country that's very comfortable with the idea of therapists. That, if you're struggling, you need to go talk to somebody. In other countries, it's not viewed the same way. It's really, I've got a couple of Indian boys on my team. If they sprain their ankle, they want to, put snake juice on it or something. They won't go to the trainers, and so we're a lot more advanced and much more ADHD oriented than other countries. There's no doubt about it.
On the other hand, still, I think there's a striking similarity among children of this generation all across the world. If I'm working with a college student from Shanghai, for example, I'm seeing essentially an American student culturally. And naturally, it's the media, I think, that created a common zeitgeist, a common culture. So I think most kids, most college students around the world have many of the same cultural expectations. Just that economically, I think the U.S. has re-entered the third world, and a lot of the anxieties that we found more among our UK and subcontinent and Oriental neighbors, now American families are sharing these, and a lot of that's getting transmitted, I think, to the kids. The Germans are still wealthy, but of course, they learn their lesson a few times.
Yeah.
I have a statement and then two questions. One of them is, I was trained as a Montessori teacher and taught for a couple of years, and I've been married to Mary Lou for a long time. Getting longer all the time. But keeping in mind the fact that I'm sitting here thinking of what you said earlier about some of the basic things, and my mind starts to wander a little bit. And one of the things is the pyramids were built basically with tools that consisted of ropes and wooden sleds and almost no metal whatsoever, and a triangle and a plumb bob, and possibly help from outer space, but we're not sure about that. And Maria Montessori started her programs as a doctor trained about 1900 and died in about 1958.
52.
Right? And the work that she did is still going on. And a lot of what I hear you talking about as far as awareness of things is she had found out, but it's not surprising because a lot of things were going on at 1900, Einstein and everything else, amazing things. But with all your experience and your age and with what you're dealing with right now, the two questions are, one is for if you were in a position to give advice, or maybe it's just thinking about it, what would you think would be something that parents could do that they're not doing now based on what you're seeing? And the other thing would be, what would be basic, simple things that they could be doing? So two different sides of the same question.
I mean, one of the things that I even like in looking at the classrooms is that, the children are there to discover, but the classroom's already been set up with age-appropriate, developmentally appropriate kinds of materials that they can gravitate towards. So there is that real sense of structure and guidance, okay? I think what I'm seeing more and more is like, as with generation after generation, is that we're treating children as they're sawed-off adults. They're just short adults. So therefore we talk to them all the time about everything. And so what do you want to dress up in today, my little 3-year-old? It's like, really? Or what do you want to eat? I know everything about nutrition at this age. And it's like, and there's a sense of this kind of very loving guidance and direction, while not imposing yourself, but you are the adult, okay? You're not the friend, you're not the peer of the child, and that just gets to be so important. And to be able to provide that kind of structure and guidance is just so important, all right? in a loving environment, that really respects the child and allows the child to grow. I mean, you give children options, but you decide what the options are in terms of what would be appropriate, all right? You don't just lay it open like, whatever you want, It's like, no. So that would be, I mean, sometimes all right, I'll just say this, I don't have any children. I've been too busy with other people's children, okay? And a lot of times I get nailed for that, but you don't have children. You don't know what it's like. Okay?
Bring up yours.
Yeah, I'm bringing up yours. And the other, it's like, and when I go to family gatherings, sometimes I just have to zip it, because I still want to be in the family, And it's like, so the therapist hat goes in the corner, and it's just like, oh man, and then when I have my firmness and structure and whatnot, it's like, really, you're saying that to little Billy, And it's like, yeah, little Billy just knows and needs to know that you don't take a swipe at your uncle's head with that kind of bat, and that it's funny, okay? And that's all I'm talking about. This kind of guidance, the guidance, The one thing that anybody who comes into my office is a very homely place, so that's where I spend so much of my time. And it's like there's all these little sayings on boards and everything else, And the one I saw once that just sticks with me. It's like what parents can give children are roots and wings, okay? Roots and wings. Give them a good structure, good guidance, firm structure. Give them that, and then let them just fly. Let them just discover themselves. Let them grow their wings, okay? And it seems so simple, but I've always been very, very pragmatic, even in all my sessions. Is like, keep the principles very, very simple. The work is hard, but the principles should be very, very simple, so you never get confused about what I need to be doing, okay?
Have you read our mission statement? Because it's believe, guide, step aside, let fly.
Yeah, well, I know when I saw that, it's like, oh my God, I'm home.
Has anybody here read Khalil Gibran's little paragraph on children? Your children are not your children. If you haven't seen this, just Google it. Khalil Gibran, Your Children. But he envisions children as really arrows. You guys were the archers, and you can take aim. You can point the child in a particular trajectory. But because your children are really not yours, they're existence longing for itself, I think. But there's something that's resonant of modern neurobiology in this. There's some hard science behind that. And he wrote this long before any of that came into being. It's just an elegant way of looking at the control you have. You can point them in the right direction, but you really can't control them once they're flying. I think what you can do, which is answer your question, Mr. Cobb, is to perhaps allow them to become irrationally passionate about something, to be a bore, to try to build that model airplane, even if it's cold outside and they're not coming in for dinner, to let them immerse themselves in something, and to be ready to pick them up when they fail and to help process that information. Well, if it wasn't this, it was something else. When I was 12, I built a rowboat 12 feet long out of wood, and I sailed it from Old Saybrook, Connecticut to Long Island and back. Presented my mother with flowers from East Marion, New York. She was quite angry. It was midnight. I said, guess where these came from? But to be able to do that, not necessarily take a physical risk, but to take an intellectual risk, I think is important.
Yeah, I think you celebrate failure. It's the only way they learn. We don't really learn a lot from success. We move past it. We win a match, we move to the next one. We don't even think about how hard it was to win the match. As soon as they fail, as soon as they lose, the train stops. And there's this mess, and they need to have it framed for them and help them understand this is what happened, this is why. Life is not fair. There are not people out there waiting to celebrate their successes. this is a tough journey. Let them fail and be there to help them understand why. And sometimes it's not always explainable. It may just simply be, life is not always fair. People ask me all the time, what's my proudest moment as a coach? My proudest moment as a coach was when we lost 2 years ago at Princeton. We hadn't lost in 14 years. And our team, there's a little ceremony at the end of the national championships where the two teams line up and they walk across the court and they shake hands. And as I was standing on the court, I was looking at my team and they were standing there, these are grown boys, crying hysterically, snot running down their noses, making no effort to conceal their anguish. And I've never been so proud of a group of people before, because what it showed me was they went all in. How many people in life ever really go all in? We stick our toe in the water, and then failure is only partial. Well, they went all in. They were prepared to really celebrate winning on a drunken binge for a week probably, but they also were willing to accept the devastation of that failure. That is beautiful, beautiful stuff. I was so proud of them. Let your kids fail and help them understand why and how and what it means. It happens at the very beginning. When your little baby falls, what do? Do you go, huh? Because if you do, they'll cry. Just let them fall.
Well, I mean, the other piece to that is that when I again, at family situations, it's like, oh, you know, it's like, no, don't react like that. Let the child know that you believe in that child, that they can handle this, that yeah, they're down there. Now let them figure out what they're experiencing. Let them find the way up even, okay? And you're right there, okay? But you're not giving them cues that they're helpless to be able to deal with this situation. Every time you come and rush and pick you up, or you can't get scraped, you can't do this, you can't do this, it's like, then you're making the child have this ongoing sense of helplessness. You know, that I can't make things happen. And then they come to college and they really can't make things happen. They can make stuff happen maybe in the classroom, but again, they're not enjoying that. The one thing I really enjoyed about over all these years, the kids that just really stick out in my mind are the kids who, from their hobbies at school, found careers. Not from anything that they were learning inside the classroom. You know, I had one guy, his parents really wanted him to go to med school. He had to be in med school. He hated all that stuff. And he took art classes whenever he could fit them in. And then he started doodling in his own room and everything else. Before you know it, by the time he was a senior, he didn't apply to med school. He took all of his drawings and everything else, made a portfolio, and his first job out was designing shoes for Nike. Okay, and it's like
What a failure!
Yeah, I didn't become a doctor for God's sakes, you know. And then I had another guy who really was ADHD in the sense is that it was something more than that. It was probably something just really neurologically wrong, you know. That I mean, this kid could not cross the street without his drugs. I mean, really, he was a danger to himself. All right, and therefore, I don't even see it as ADD. I really see it as some sort of brain dysfunction that is something very, very rare and everything else. Okay, but this kid, he wrote 2 science fiction novels. He would on the computer create spaceships, you know, digitally, and as he left school, he went to different conferences. He immediately got picked up as a job, you know, working for some sort of digital media place with science fiction, right? I mean, he's their dream, you know? And it's like, and whatever he majored in, who cared what he majored in? Nobody cared.
Yeah, it reminded me of a student, a friend of mine at UConn. It took him 8 years to graduate. He was just the funniest guy. He worked at the UConn Co-op. And he was like the walking encyclopedia. He knew everything about any subject matter known to anyone. And but yet he refused to write papers for classes. So he didn't get through the courses like he needed to. But after graduation, a number of years later, I'm at the mall and he goes, "Hey Paulina, nice to see you. I was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire." He won $200,000. He went on the show and he got that far because he knew, he read so much, he knew about everything, but it was his own way of picking information up, and people used to laugh at him because he was just an odd individual, but he just loved certain subject matters in his own way. And it wasn't the way the teachers wanted him to do it in the classroom, but yet he learned so much about everything, and it was valuable because later, I mean, he was on that show. He goes, watch me, I'm going to be on next week, and I couldn't believe it. And it was always like, I always say that to people, I go, so you see, it took him 8 years, he couldn't get through the classes, but he was such an incredibly intelligent individual.
Yeah.
It didn't matter how he got there, but he did it his own way.
It's interesting that 1 out of every 100 live births is in the autism spectrum. And what you just described is plainly an autistic way of viewing reality. But you've got to figure, you know, we go to the evolutionary psychologists and ask, well, why is this not out of the gene pool if it didn't lead to success? It does. I met Temple Grandin this summer, and it was just an awesome experience. Here's a woman who thinks totally visually, who can't do algebra, but yet who can write like an angel and gives the best presentation I've ever seen. She's just absolutely. But you know, when you begin looking for certain traits that are useful, you can look at the writing of Leonardo da Vinci and his notebooks, and you think, my gosh, plainly, here's an Aspie who found as an artist, not only a designer of weapons and fortifications, which is how he started, but as probably the font of the most meaningful Renaissance art. The Last Supper, wow, it's breathtaking. So I think this notion of letting the child do something that's passionate, even if it seems a little geeky to us, it's so profound and so important. Because otherwise they'll end up, like one of my more talented Aspie clients, going back home and working for dad and not trying to do the things that we're meant to do for the remainder of the tribe. You know, us, you know, they can benefit us.
Does anyone else have a question? Go ahead, Melissa.
I'll stand up just because I can't see everyone. Something that Dr. Anto said kind of spoke to me very little bit. It made me wonder, I wholeheartedly believe in the person my daughter is becoming in this school, but I also know the realities of a cutthroat world. I was in a corporate world, I climbed my way to the top very quickly, and I understand, you know, what you're talking about in college, what you're seeing with these kids, but the world that they're going into also is, you're right, is cutthroat. And do you think that we should be, or how do we prepare them for that type of world, even if we should be?
You know what? I mean, what I was even reading in some of the plaques on the wall and everything else, it's like what you're preparing even these little ones for right now is to change that. Okay? Don't get them ready to fit into it. Get them ready to change it. Okay? Because that's not healthy. You know. And there still are ways that you can find your way and find satisfaction. Of course, this is going to lead to the financial divide, okay? Because you're going to pick things that are not going to be very financially remunerative to you, but you're going to be as happy as a pig in mud, okay? Because that's what you like doing, you know? And because I saw another poster, it's like once you find something you really like doing, you'll never work another day in your life. And you know, I think all of us find that. You know, it's like I'm not going to work. You know, it's like I get up because I want to get up and go. You know, and do what I do. And it's like. And you can still find that, okay? I think the idea that, you know, all this power and everything else is held by these. I tell people, the seniors, if you're going to an interview, you're interviewing those people as well as they're interviewing you. If somebody's going to treat you very, very disrespectfully and everything else, you really want to work for them? Really? That's what you want? It's like you can find something else, but you've got to be clear about who you are and be able to discover that.
There is a cold calculus, by the way. If you're good at something, and that something is an occupation that's occupied by a lot of people and doesn't pay well, you're going to excel at this occupation. You're going to have less competition in a real sense because you're good at it. On the other hand, if you want to be a lawyer, and you know you can earn a lot of money as a lawyer, but you're just not awfully good, you're probably going to crash and burn and fail. I have a wonderful career counselor I just hired who's a recovering lawyer right now. But you can imagine the financial costs of doing something that you don't have the weaponry, you don't have the arsenal to do. And I think it's kind of like my buddy, the IT professional, who would go use DOS and say, I must not go into the dark place alone, as she started doing code. But you want to equip your children with the best armamentarium, the best weaponry to fight this beast as possible. And the things they have to call on are actually up here. If the child is musically talented, sure, a musical career may take a while, but it's probably a better bet than going into some entrepreneurial business or getting an MBA. If the child is a good, talented visual artist, that's awesome. I've got 2 of them in my own family. One's a professor at Connecticut State University, and the other is in grad school right now. But it's not a bad bet if she has the talent.
I think that create a really, really loving environment at home. Create a nurturing educational experience, which is why you're here, and create a really loving environment at home. Because successful people know that if they fail, they're still loved. People that struggle don't know that. And so that's a problem. I recently gave a speech in Greenwich, Connecticut. And the topic was how to raise children in a pressurized society in Greenwich, Connecticut. And so my question to them was, how many of you saw A Few Good Men? And of course everybody raised their hands. And I said, you can't take the truth. The reason your children are growing up in a pressurized society is because you're creating a pressurized society. You can't protect them from the reality that it's brutal out there, but let them know that no matter what happens, they're still going to be loved. It's still okay.
Can I just add one little thing as head of school? I often say this to the teachers, and I would say it to your parents. Enjoy the children. We get so worried. We're all so worried. And the truth is, they're going to become what they're meant to be, I think. They're going to become what they're meant to be. How nice to love them for who they are. And that's a gift that you can give them. If you could give them any gift, it's love them for who they are. And enjoy these years. You hear this from your parents and grandparents. It goes by very quickly. And the truth is, what we do as Montessorians is we try to get into their world and understand who each of them are as individuals. That's what we really do. When they come into the class, we're looking at them very differently because they're each unique. And we appreciate them. We appreciate, sometimes they can have a very difficult day, or day isn't in. I look at Chris, I look at Hawk, she knows what I'm talking about. But we're looking at the potential. The potential is there in each of us. But to know that they are loved for who they are is an enormous gift. So enjoy them.
It's impossible not to. Look at that child. She's beautiful. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.